The Clone Wars are always remembered as Palpatine's masterstroke, the ultimate flex of a Sith Lord playing both sides like some galaxy-sized poker game. But here is the uncomfortable truth. He did not actually need to win anything. The Jedi basically walked themselves into the trap and then helpfully nailed the lid shut on their own coffin. Think about it. The Jedi were supposed to be guardians of peace, diplomats, philosophers, wise old sages who meditated on the Force. And somehow they woke up one morning and said, sure, let us be generals of a cloned army, built in secret, without our knowledge. That is like finding out your neighbour bought a tank and deciding to be the one who drives it. No questions asked. Just blind loyalty dressed up as duty. And the wild part is they actually convinced themselves it was noble. They kept repeating that they were fighting for peace while blasting droids to pieces across the galaxy. They sat in war councils debating tactics like seasoned admirals, while ignoring that they were literally breaking every principle their order stood for. Imagine monks trading their prayer beads for machine guns, and telling everyone it is fine because the Senate said so. Meanwhile, Palpatine barely lifted a finger. He sat in his chair, smiled, and watched them burn their own credibility to the ground. He did not have to trick them into arrogance, they were already halfway there. He did not have to twist their values, he just gave them the stage to show how compromised they had become. It is the kind of villainy that looks brilliant, but's really just opportunism. And the cost of those choices is what makes the story so brutal. Clones bred to be disposable. Jedi turned into soldiers instead of teachers. Anakin pushed deeper into resentment while his masters lectured him about calm. Every decision layered on top of the last until collapse was not just possible, it was guaranteed. It was not the brilliance of one man that doomed the order, it was the blindness of many. In this video, we are going to break down how the Jedi sabotaged themselves from the inside, why their arrogance made Palpatine's rise effortless, how their loyalty to a corrupt system doomed them, and why Order 66 was never really about clones turning on Jedi, but about Jedi turning on their own values long before a single blaster was fired. The genius chess master pulling strings on both sides until the Jedi fall into his trap. But what if that is not really the story? What if the truth is that Palpatine barely had to win anything? Because the Jedi basically did all the work of destroying themselves. Think about how strange it is that the guardians of peace and justice suddenly became generals leading armies. These are monks raised on meditation and philosophy, not war tactics and battle formations. Yet by the time the war kicks into gear, you see Jedi sitting in war councils, debating strategies, and literally commanding fleets like seasoned admirals. That shift feels bizarre when you stop and think about it. The question is, why did they go along with it? Why did the Order accept a role that completely contradicted their own teachings? Was it loyalty to the Senate? Was it fear of losing relevance? Or was it simple arrogance? The belief that they could control a war without being consumed by it? Those questions hang over every Jedi decision in the Clone Wars. Palpatine did not force them to take that step. He dangled a conflict in front of them, and they jumped straight into it. It is like someone setting a mousetrap and watching as the mouse sprints toward it with confidence. The war itself became the Jedi's undoing, and they barely noticed until it was too late. That curiosity is what makes the Clone Wars so fascinating to rewatch. Once you realise Palpatine did not outfight the Jedi, he just let them unravel themselves. The whole saga takes on a new perspective. And once you see it, the frustration sets in. Because the Jedi are not just victims of some brilliant scheme, they are complicit in their own downfall. Time and again they make choices that scream disaster, and you are left wondering how they could not see it coming. For example, their loyalty to the Republic becomes almost comical. Here is an institution rotting from corruption, bribery, and corporate influence. Yet the Jedi cling to it, as though serving politicians is the same as serving peace. Every time the Senate votes on funding another wave of clone troopers, the Jedi just nod along and prepare to throw more lives into the grinder. It is maddening to watch. Then there is their blindness to the clones themselves. They fight alongside these soldiers every day, yet they never truly question what it means to use an army bred for obedience. The Jedi claim to value life, yet they treat the clones as expendable assets rather than beings with agency. That contradiction undercuts everything they stand for, and the frustration of it drips off the screen in every battle. What makes it tragic is not just their mistakes, but the sorrow of what those choices cost. The Jedi were supposed to be symbols of wisdom and restraint, yet the war twisted them into figures of violence. And watching that slow corruption unfold is heartbreaking. Take the Battle of Umbara, one of the darkest arcs in the Clone Wars. Jedi General Ponkrell treats clones like disposable tools, sending them into reckless assaults and even tricking them into killing each other. That arc is not an outlier. It is a warning of what happens when Jedi embrace militarism without accountability. The sorrow of those episodes is seeing the clones lose faith in the very order they were created to serve. And then there is the emotional toll on the Jedi themselves. We see Ahsoka Tano framed for crimes she did not commit, abandoned by the council she trusted. We see Obi-Wan forced to constantly sacrifice his own feelings, even when it destroys him inside. We see Yoda, a figure of calm wisdom, slipping into despair as the war drags on. These are not triumphs, they are tragedies playing out in slow motion. The greatest sorrow comes in how easily they could have avoided it. If the Jedi had simply stepped back, refused to become pawns of the Senate, and pursued peace on their own terms, the Republic might have survived. Instead, they let the war consume them, and in doing so they doomed the very institution they were sworn to protect. By the time Order 66 arrives, it almost feels inevitable. The sorrow is that the Jedi's downfall was not just engineered by Palpatine, it was invited by their own choices. And that makes it all the more devastating. And yet, despite all the sorrow and frustration, there is awe in how perfectly the story is crafted. Star Wars turns the fall of the Jedi into one of the most compelling cautionary tales ever put on screen. And it does so with visuals and themes that still take your breath away. The sight of Jedi leading clone armies across planets like Geonosis, Felucia, and Kashyyyk is stunning. It feels epic, almost mythic. Rows of soldiers charging into battle with lightsabers blazing at the front. It is awe-inspiring in scale, and that is part of the trick. Because while we marvel at the spectacle, we also sense the irony of peacekeepers becoming generals. There is also awe in how Palpatine barely lifts a finger. His greatest weapon is patience. Watching him sit in the Senate chambers with that sly smile as the Jedi dig their own grave is chilling. It is the kind of villainy that leaves you stunned because it is so quiet and so effective. Even the moments of collapse carry a strange awe. Order 66, with Jedi cut down across the galaxy, is horrifying but unforgettable. The montage of betrayal is one of the most powerful sequences in Star Wars because it blends tragedy with spectacle in a way few stories ever achieve. But even in the ruins, there is hope, because the fall of the Jedi does not erase their legacy entirely. The Order may have collapsed, but individuals within it still embodied what the Jedi were meant to be, and their survival plants the seeds for something new. Ahsoka Tano walking away from the Council is one of the greatest acts of hope in the saga. She refuses to let the failures of the institution define her, and in doing so she becomes a symbol of what the Jedi could have been. Her survival proves that wisdom and compassion can endure even when the system rots. Obi-Wan represents another strand of hope. He loses everything, yet he still chooses to protect Luke, clinging to the possibility that the future can be rebuilt through the next generation. His sacrifice is not in vain, it is an act of stubborn hope that the galaxy can still recover. Even Yoda, exiled and broken, carries hope forward. His final lessons to Luke in Empire Strikes Back remind us that the Jedi were more than their failures. That knowledge and light can rise again if someone is willing to learn from the past. So while the Jedi lost the Clone Wars, their story is not just about failure, it is also about resilience. About the idea that hope can survive even in the darkest collapse. And that is what keeps their legacy alive. At the end of it all, the resolution is bittersweet. Palpatine did not win the Clone Wars by being unstoppable. He won because the Jedi lost it for him. Their arrogance, their blind loyalty, and their compromises handed him the keys to the Republic, without him ever needing to fight. The tragedy is how preventable it all was. The Jedi were not defeated by strength. They were defeated by their own decisions. They traded their role as guardians of peace for the temporary power of generals. And that choice sealed their fate. It is a haunting reminder that even the wisest institutions can collapse when they forget their purpose. The Jedi were meant to serve the Force, not politicians. To protect the innocent, not wage endless wars. But they lost sight of that, and the galaxy paid the price. And yet within that tragedy lies a lesson. Because Star Wars is not just about lightsabers and battles. It is about the dangers of arrogance, the cost of compromise, and the resilience that follows collapse. The Jedi's fall is both a warning and a story of rebirth. So yes, Palpatine sat on the throne at the end of the Clone Wars. But it was not because he conquered the Jedi, it was because they conquered themselves. And that resolution is what makes their downfall one of the most tragic and powerful stories in all of Star Wars.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.